Good evening. It is Sunday, April the 10th, about 6:50 p.m. My name is Shay Gibson with Weather Flow. This is a Chucktown Wind Report brought to you by Wind Alert. First I want to say thank you to Tim Fitzgerald and all involved with putting on the third annual Fort to Battery race. Well done. It was fun, it was fast, and it was interesting. It was a really neat event. Really liked the direction of wind in the swell period. Everything. Once the race got going, it was really a lot. It was so much fun. It was fun all the way around. But thank you very much, Tim, once again for being such a great part of the Charleston community for the kiteboarding, for the kiteboarders and the sailing community to bring them together for such an event. Great job. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about winds and weather for the next few days, as we had high pressure today built in along the eastern seaboard that was able to bring us a moderate east-northeast wind. It cranked up pretty high this morning once it coupled along the land and sea interface and gave some boost along the east-northeast sea breezing, and then that kept the gradient going all day long, especially with some of this troughing moving into the area. So this high pressure will be moving out into the Atlantic by tomorrow, and that will bring in a southeasterly flow, so more or less a modest flow. We're looking at about 8 to 12 knots, topping out about 13 in the Charleston Harbor where it funnels through. And then as we get into Tuesday, the high pressure becomes a little bit more robust. We have this low pressure here coming across the Great Lakes. Once it makes this connection down here to the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to draw a cold front across the country and head towards the coastline. So with this southerly flow coming up, on Tuesday, it becomes a little bit more south to south-southwest, and then we get some of that westerly push up high in the mid to upper level atmosphere, and then we get some return flow for our sea breezing. What that means is we get a moderate sea breeze. So whereas tomorrow's looking weak, Tuesday looks like we could be seeing 12 to 16 knots with potential for 14 to 18 knots, and maybe a little bit higher later in the afternoon, especially as that front draws a little bit closer and the gradient tightens along the coast. So we have a couple of things there for Tuesday working in our favor for a decent sea breeze. Now Tuesday night, the front goes through, then we have high pressure building down from Canada, and that's going to increase the gradient behind it, so we'll see a northeasterly flow work down the coastline. And then what we're looking at for Wednesday is possible low pressure developing off of the South Carolina, North Carolina coast and lingering for a few days. Let's go ahead and take a look. I want to look at the computer models for this, and we'll start at 0 hours, which is today. Here's the high pressure right here. I'm going to turn on the Epic pen that I have to draw on the maps here, so give that a second to load, and we'll talk about the next couple of days and go forward with the models. So here's 24 hours. We see that high pressure well out into the Atlantic with that southeasterly flow. We have the ridge axis, which comes from the center. It's usually just an extension in the center, comes all the way down. Looks like it's predicting it to come across through northern Florida, and that basically just means weaker winds along this sector here, where you really just get 10-knot tops. That's usually just that's causes doldrums and slowing of winds. But as we get into Tuesday, and I'm using the 18Z on Tuesday up here. You see the number, that's 6 p.m., which really in UTC time, we back that out 5 hours, so it's looking 1 p.m. But as we see Tuesday at 1 p.m., that flow becomes more south to southwesterly as the front draws closer. Here's the low pressure that we're watching along the tail end of this boundary, and that's going to draw the sea breezes. Now, as we get into Wednesday, we see the frontal boundary hung up along the coastline. We see high pressure to the north. Now, this is going to be the main player. That's the Canadian high, and it's going to really be increasing the winds down the coastline, and that's because low pressure may be developing as we get into Thursday, and we have closed low pressure possibly developing off the North Carolina coast. We got this high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south. This is what we call a Rex block, and what it is we have clockwise directions coming here from the high. We have counterclockwise directions wrapping around from the low. It keeps top spin on these low pressure systems, and this is what we call tropical development in the warmer months with the warmer water. Sometimes subtropical development this time of the year. It's not out of the question. I'm not saying anything about any kind of hurricane Atlantic activity, nothing like that of the sort. Just an area of low pressure to watch off the coastline. But the main thing about this is it's going to keep this northeasterly gradient down the coastline, which means maybe some shallow coastal flooding and some persistent winds and persistent coastal erosions as the wave heights come up from this system. And this low could jog down to the south and back up to the north. Some of the models are playing with it going up and then back in and then back out again. Basically what it means, it's the Rex block is going to be blocking pattern. This entire pattern is going to be sitting for days. So we look at the medium range models, and a lot of them are in agreement with this pattern staying for several days until Saturday. So we'll take a look at that again on Tuesday as far as what Wednesday through Saturday are going to do. But at least you know well about what's going to happen tomorrow and Tuesday. So that much we know of. Wednesday's a little bit of a wild card when all this goes down, but we'll take a look at that later. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Datascope for Charleston. And first, let me take a quick peek at the GRU on radar. Looks like things are clearing out. Some troughing earlier. That's moving out of the area. We have an undercut, that easterly wind, and then we have mid-level or mid-level troughing at about 18,000 feet or so, where these clouds are going over the top. So most of that's clearing out. There's a little bit of offshore rains associated with it, so I'm going to close out the GRU on radar, and let's go back to Datascope for Charleston. We're still seeing a 13-knot flow at the Isle of Palms and Folly Beach piers, 11 knots in the harbor, and it looks like we've got topping out in gust in the mid-teens. It looks like it's going to probably slowly fade overnight, if not fall to about 10 knots. And if we look at the details for the models, for the wind models, we can see what the trends are. And let's select all. Let those load. And here we go. So when we get into tonight, we have a little bit of a bump around 1 a.m. on the southeast turn, and then we pan out. The models are all keeping this low below 10 knots, most of them. So we'll say 8 to 12 knots for tomorrow. And then as we go in time for Tuesday, that's where you see the bump in the afternoon during the peak heating and sea breeze circulations. The North American model 5 kilometer, which is high resolution, and the GFS, or I'm sorry, the NAM 12 are both catching on this. The GFS and WaveWatch 3 models are both down below. So we'll take a look at that tomorrow night. I'll do another video tomorrow night to talk about what's going to happen for Tuesday. There is some potential there. And then as we get into later in the week, you see that north-northeasterly flow arrive and just linger for days and days and days. That could just mean some increased tidal fluxing. So the more onshore it is, the more the tidal flooding will occur. So we'll have to be watching that closely. And you can even see it down here in the GFS models, how the winds stay up. But offshore north-northeasterly is not so much to worry about. It's northeast and east-northeasterlies that we have to. Air temperatures for the area. Here we go. For tomorrow, we have 77 degrees on the southeast flow, 74 for Tuesday on the southerly flow, southwesterly flow. And then we cool down with those northerly winds and slowly warm up and into next week where we get back into a spring-like pattern. So I want to take a look at the sea surface temperatures. And right now, the last reading was 64.9 degrees. So the sea surface temperatures are lingering at that temperature. They've been that way for weeks now, and that's mainly because we've had some warm-ups and then we've had some cool downs overnight, especially cool downs with the overnight temperatures being a big factor in pulling the surface temperatures down. So it looks like we're going to stay this way through the rest of the week, and then next week if we get warmed back up into the 80s or near 80, these water temps should come up just a little bit. So we may be back up to upper 60s by late next week. A little early to tell, but that's what it is. The Gulf Stream is just not filled in over the cooler shelf waters very quickly, but at least it's warm enough to not have to freeze out there without a spring suit, especially if the temperatures are up a little bit. So that's going to do it for the Chucktown Wind Report, and until next time, I'll be back on tomorrow night to do another video. Thank you for watching, and take care.